Yeah, so for the Seahawks, MVP, who would be your MVP this year? And I think my answer is going to irritate some people, but we might get some, hear something otherwise a little bit later in the show. But Geno Smith.
He's your MVP?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I thought he had a good enough year. I think he can win a playoff game. We know that he can take us on game-winning drives. And the other thing is, I'm just going, well, who else would it be?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you got?
I would say Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I realize that MVP, in the way it's voted on in the NFL ranks, it's basically it's more or less the best quarterback on a really good team. So I think if you just go off stats this past season, Joe Burrow would have been the MVP, like you said, 43 touchdowns, 70.6% completion rate. I mean, he was the most productive quarterback in the NFL this year.
Right.
But the Bengals were 9-8. So, it goes to another player on a better team. So I would say if the definition is the most outstanding player, I would give it to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now, I would say that anytime you're, debating or discussing who is the MVP on a given team, unless the quarterback is terrible, by definition, the quarterback is probably going to be the most valuable player on the team. So I would say I tend to look at MVP more as the most outstanding player. And to me, Jackson Smith and Jigba was more outstanding than Geno Smith, even though, if you go off of who was less replaceable, it was Geno Smith. But who was the most outstanding player, I would say Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah. The next category we have here is, you have JSN, I have Geno. Coach of the year. Now, obviously it would be assistant of the year because we're kind of, it would be Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald did a great job. Look, he came in here, you were saying about Joe Burrow, he won 9 games. Well, Geno won 10. And so, 10-7 is just an unbelievable start, I think. But if you look at, some of the assistants, one of the guys I really like is because I know him, Kennedy Polamalu, who does a good job with the running backs, I think. And just the things that he says to the players, and I got a chance to talk to him in Tennessee about, some of the things that I like him because I think he really relates well to the guys, but he is an old school guy, and he has all of those old school football things that, that you hear guys nowadays talk about. So, yeah, I would go with him. How about you?
Leslie Frazier. And I had a hard time, really making a strong case for any one position coach or anything like that, doing some outstanding job. So I'm going to say Leslie Frazier just because I do know that he was a very important piece of that coaching staff as kind of the, I guess you could call it, if you want to speak in movie terms, Godfather terms, like the consigliere.
Yeah.
If I'm saying it right. He was the Tom Hagen, I think, to Mike Macdonald, the guy who, Mike Macdonald was a 37-year-old first-time head coach. And, when you're in that position, you need to have people to lean on, people who have been there and done that. And that was Leslie Frazier. He was a big part of a sounding board, just a advisor, a confidant, all that to Mike Macdonald in year one. And from what I understand, he was played a big role in the offensive coordinator search as well.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. And then as far as the offensive player of the year goes, I would have, I had Geno as the MVP. I would go with JSN. How about you?
Well, yeah, if I'm allowed to double dip, I would go JSN. Now, if I had to pick somebody else, then it becomes really tough. If you can't, now in the NFL, how it works is the offensive player of the year usually goes to the best non-quarterback. In this case, it was Saquon Barkley. So, God, if I had to pick somebody else other than, I would maybe go Charles Cross as their bet. If we already passed up Geno Smith for MVP, and if he's not going to be the offensive player of the year, I would say. And if we already gave the MVP to JSN, I would say the next best offensive player on the Seahawks this past year was probably Charles Cross.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think it's, and I think he kind of got lumped in with a bad year offensive line-wise. Yeah. So, and then defensive player of the year, Patrick Surtain. Myles Garrett is always a monster. But as far as the Seahawks' most valuable defensive player, even though he didn't have the stats, Witherspoon, to me, is just – every year I feel like that he's going to be the best player on the field. But Big Cat had a really good year. So, but yeah, I guess I would go with Spoon. How about you?
Yeah, I would have gone with Leonard Williams, and I'm not just saying that to be the for the sake of balance for the conversation. Yeah, I would say Leonard Williams. He was dominant, and it's a lot of times you see interior defensive linemen who play a lot better than the stats show, meaning like they may not have the sacks, but they're making impact plays that just don't show up in the stat sheet. Well, he was doing both. He was dominating, and it was showing up in the stat sheet. I mean, the guy had a 92, whatever it was, yard, pick six, double-digit sacks, I believe it was. Played, he was out there, pretty much the entire time. Dominant football from him.
Yeah, I think did he miss one game or two?
I think he missed. Yeah, he may have missed the Detroit game.
Detroit game for sure. Yeah, definitely. And then we skip ahead. Defensive Rookie of the Year was Jared Verse, which his running mate Fisk, the D lineman they took in the second round for the Rams, he actually had more sacks, but he was incredibly disruptive. But what I would say is, as far as Rookie of the Year defensively, it's of course Tyrese Knight. Tyrese Knight had a great year. Would you agree with that?
Would you pick him over Byron Murphy?
Yeah. Yeah. And Byron Murphy, I think, there's lots of things that he does, obviously, that don't get noticed. And I don't think he had a bad year at all. He just didn't show up a lot in the stats. But, we'll hear from Robbie Tobeck later, who we talked to yesterday, that those guys put pressure. They don't necessarily get the sacks. And then real quick, as far as the Seahawks offensive player of the year, rookie of the year, I should say, got to go with A.J. Barner.
Yeah, that's one where, I'm going to agree with you on that one. He was, remember, for a guy who was really billed as a blocking tight end, what did he lead the tight ends in touchdown catches with 4? Yeah. And some pretty big catches in addition to blocking. So he looks like another nice mid-round pick for them.
Yeah, and NFL-wise, by the way, that was Jaden Daniels. That was, I think that was kind of a foregone conclusion. Yeah. He definitely had an unbelievable year.